I'm Nick Johnson, president at Willis Johnson Associates. My guest today is Tim Kollatschny. He's a client of ours and a former Shell oil executive whose career ended unexpectedly in 2018. One of the biggest challenges we see with retirement, and Tim really experienced this firsthand, is the identity shift, the emotional toll that comes with moving from a high powered, busy career into the next phase of life. During this transition, he experienced anxiety, eventually leading to addiction. Now, he sought help, he rebuilt his purpose, and sponsored others through addiction while running a coaching practice for executives, leaders, and those transitioning into retirement themselves. Tim, I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you, Nick, for having me. I'm really excited about the conversation that we're going to have today.
I think this is just such an important topic. I mean, I see this all the time with our clients. It's the number of questions we get asked is, do I have enough to retire? Do I have enough to afford what's my medical care? Do I have enough money for insurance? What's that all going to look like? Where am I going to get my money from? And then, what we see happen the first 6 to 9 months as they transition to retirement is this search for purpose or identity.
Yeah.
And that's a big challenge that I see with people is they're not necessarily expecting sometimes how abrupt the shift can be.
What you've described, the financial aspects of it, and basically how am I going to be okay? How am I going to be okay? I know for myself, that was top of mind.
Mhm.
And that, looking back and kind of understanding more about motivations and how we work and that those sorts of things, that really gets down to kind of a safety
Mhm.
piece, like a baseline, the base of a pyramid.
Mhm. Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Exactly, exactly. It's safety. So
Mhm.
how am I going to be safe? And a lot of times I think, and I know for myself, that overshadowed and pushed out the things that were really in my mind that I was thinking about, but not really voicing, which was this sense of identity. Who am I?
Mhm.
What is my purpose? Those really key things, why am I here? Those are the really key things that I know for myself got pushed to the side because the focus was on how am I going to be okay financially?
Yeah, and that's usually what we see. I mean, as I've seen phrased before, we're all addicted to food and shelter and clothing, and we got to make sure that's covered. But once that's covered, that's not necessarily fulfilling in of itself. And we get so much fulfillment from our work identity. We get so much of our social connections from our work identity. And when that's not there, I mean, heck, it's the first thing, second thing maybe you ask when you're at a dinner party or you're at a barbecue is, what do you do? It's a transition for a lot of people.
It's interesting when I was working and running this global chemical business, I knew who I was. I knew what my identity was. I knew what my purpose was. I had been there for 30 years. So, Shell had been my life from graduating college to that time.
Your entire professional adult career all at one company.
All at one company. No, I did a lot of different things, and that's one of the things that really drove me was moving into different parts of Shell, learning that business,
Mhm.
figuring out how it works and how I could make changes that was going to make it better. That was really my purpose at that time: is how do I come in, respect what's been done, and figure out how to make things better. And that was kind of the reputation that I garnered from that. Starting off in procurement, moving to retail marketing,
Mhm.
moving to commercial fuels, moving to global to strategy and planning for the entire U.S. company, downstream company. Then going into supply and trading, which I knew nothing about, and then finally going into chemicals. I don't have a chemical background. I'm not a chemical degree holder. I'm not a chemical engineer, but going in and just learning that gave me purpose and that gave me drive.
That's really exciting. And that's where you ended your career as a general manager in the chemicals
Yes,
area.
that's right. I was running a global chemical business
Mhm.
out of Houston and wanted to work a little bit longer, maybe 4 or 5 years, so maybe one more position. I had been in this role for, at that time, 7 years, going on 7 years. So it was, and the role had grown. They had absorbed and combined different business groups, and so the role got bigger over time. At that point, I was presented with an option. I could go out and post for another role, or they would offer me an enhanced severance
Mhm.
with retirement benefits, medical benefits, things like that.
And this was 2017?
This was 2017. The job was really challenging,
Mhm.
and as it continued to grow, as they combined units and put it together, um, the job just got bigger.
Mhm.
And when I look back, in all honesty, if I'm completely honest, I was exhausted at that time.
We hear that a lot from people, especially when they've had the entire career
Yeah,
at major oil and gas companies.
yeah. As I thought about it, I'm like, okay, I get this enhanced severance.
Mhm.
I get retirement medical benefits. I get my pension. You know, we came back and worked with our advisor at Willis Johnson and worked through the numbers, and they said, "There's really no reason why you can't take this. You're going to be fine." So I made the decision to take the severance and leave. But it wasn't something that I had planned. It was something that that was just kind of presented to me, and I only had a few months from making that decision to the time that I actually left.
So is the big thing that led you to taking the package the stress, the tired, the feeling financially comfortable to do it, and you just figured that the next phase would be better, would be different, would be, a chance to relax and refresh, or what was going through your mind at the time?
At the time, I was married.
Mhm.
My husband was 14 years older than me, so we said this is a time for us to go travel and
Mhm.
and kind of see everything.
To be together, which it's hard to do with a high-powered, high-demand career.
It is. It is for sure. I was so exhausted, as you said. I was just very exhausted, and mentally and physically, it just worn on me. I would say maybe even spiritually, and so I got to a point where I just said, "This is the better option.
Mhm.
I've done what I need to do here," and so I made the decision to leave.
Let me go back to your career at Shell because I
Yeah,
want to explore what happened after leaving. But I want to emphasize one thing that your career at Shell, you were one of the few openly gay executives in Shell's upper
yeah,
management.
yeah,
Can you tell me a little bit about? And this was back in 2015 and prior, was my
yeah,
understanding. Can you
yeah,
tell me a little bit about that and what that
yeah.
was like?
Absolutely. I came out at Shell in 1999.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't like it is now.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't accepted. And I just realized that at that point, by not being who I was at work,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't bringing my full self. And so much of the capacity in my mind was spent on trying to prove myself
Mm-hmm.
and thinking about, okay, what do I need to do? When I removed that, that constant thought in my head, my job really, my work really improved, and that's when my career really took off. Then I moved into this strategy role that I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned, and had an amazing boss named Marilyn. She was the first boss who I'd come out to.
Mm-hmm.
She asked the group for holidays. She said, "Would you rather have a lunch here in the office, or would you rather go out to dinner with spouses?"
Mm-hmm.
I was the only one who raised my hand for the lunch.
Mm-hmm.
Afterward, she said, "Hey, Tim, can you come into my office for a second?" And
Mm-hmm.
she said, "I couldn't help but notice that you were the only one who raised your hand for lunch. Perhaps it's a time to consider trusting your colleagues and just being who you are."
So she really encouraged you to open up and share.
She did.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did that go?
It went well. I mean, I showed up with my partner at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and, was now I didn't do it the best way. I didn't tell anyone ahead of time. I just showed up.
Mhm. How
Surprise.
old were you then?
I was 31, I
Okay,
wanna say.
31.
31, 30, yeah,
Mhm.
31.
So your colleagues had known you for a while,
No.
didn't know
Yeah,
that you were gay, didn't know you had a partner, you show up with a partner and they're like
yeah.
and their reaction was
Their reaction,
surprise, acceptance? Okay.
like, they were very accepting.
Mhm.
There was, I will say, one of the things that I've learned, and one of the things that I coach around, is this human need that we have for acceptance.
Mhm.
At the core of it, I want to be accepted.
Everybody does.
Everyone does. The fact is, though, that I can't control anyone's perception of me.
Mhm.
much less everyone's.
But we
And
like to think we
we
can.
like to think we can. Your perception of me is based on your lived experiences, your background, how you woke up that day. I can't control any of that. And when I let go of that, impulse to control how I'm being perceived, I get to a really centered place. And that was one of the things that I learned. I mean, the interesting thing is Shell, it's a very large company at the time, over 90,000 employees. I As I moved from one organization to the other, I had to come out to each one.
Mhm,
Well, and what I realized at that point is that people are going to feel however they're going to feel.
mhm.
But just because they feel a certain way doesn't mean that I need to show up in a way that's inconsistent with my values at my core.
That's really inspiring. One of the things you mentioned earlier is that you felt good taking the severance, taking the package, partially because you sat down with us and our team and we ran through the financial numbers. But I want to rewind a little bit before that. Even before you've been a client of Willis Johnson for a long time.
Yeah.
I was looking through the notes, and it looks like you first connected with us at a seminar that we ran at the Houston Club in One Shell Plaza.
Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about your early experience with us and how that led you to feel good about the decision to financially to take the package when it was offered?
Yeah, absolutely. I still remember going to that luncheon at the top of One Shell Plaza, and I remember some of the things that really hit me. It was yes, we're going to take care of you financially. We're going to make sure that you can do the things that you want to do.
Mhm.
The other piece of it was, you guys touch a lot on the non-financial aspects of it as well. What do you want to do in your life? You have this money. It's not about necessarily holding on to it and building it, but it's how can it serve the purpose that you want to have after work?
Yeah, there's a lot of people that think that the account balances need to grow and grow and grow and grow. And one of the things we often coach people is that you don't win by being the richest man in the graveyard. And
Yeah.
to some extent, you've built it. What do you want to do with it?
Yeah.
And that's a challenge in transitioning people from the accumulation phase to enjoying what they've built.
The work that your advisors did along the way, looking at the numbers on our regular reviews and seeing, okay, well, you can spend this, you don't, and you're going to be okay until age 95 or 96 or whatever. And doing it in a way that's conservative, that's
Mhm.
not, some pie in the sky type thing with really high returns and other assumptions that were going to kind of throw it off. But it gave me a great sense of comfort that I could live the way that I wanted to live and be okay.
Have the confidence to make the decisions and take the package when it was offered.
Exactly.
Okay, so going to that time, you took the package. The job was stressful. You were looking to spend some time with your husband. What did you envision retirement was going to look like? And then what did you find out in the early year or two of the transition to retirement from the busy, demanding corporate executive role that you had before?
I thought that I could just have the freedom to do whatever I wanted to do.
Hmm.
I could go to the gym when I wanted to go to the gym. I could go meet friends for lunch. I could travel. We went away on vacations like every month.
Hmm.
I just basically would have the freedom from work. What I didn't consider is, the freedom to live into something else.
Hmm.
I just kind of said, okay, well, I'll take an art class at the Gliselle School.
Hmm.
I'll stay busy, but busyness doesn't replace purpose. And I say that purpose never retires.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I remember, you're involved in modern art and design. You collected art.
Yeah.
You and your spouse at the time were profiled in the local media in terms of the art in your home,
Yeah.
and you were involved, and you've been involved in some boards for a while. So
Yeah.
you had some things in your life that you were doing and you were involved with, and connected with,
Yeah.
but it wasn't quite as fulfilling as you thought it was going to be.
I joined the board of Houston Habitat for Humanity.
Hmm.
I was at the time I retired on the board of the Lawndale Art Center and actually the chair of the board there. And that did give me purpose.
Mhm.
Is different being on the board than actually, like, running a
Mhm.
business. You've hired somebody to come in and do the job as the executive director.
Mhm.
You're not the executive director.
Mhm.
And so it's a very different way, and it's a different level of engagement.
I'm a big believer that we as humans, we need good stress to a degree,
Yeah.
and we need purpose, as you often refer to it, to be happy. I've got friends ask me sometimes, "When are you gonna retire? Like, what are your plans?" And I say, "I'm not sure I'm ever gonna retire. There might
Yeah.
be a downshifting, but I don't know what I would do."
Yeah.
I really enjoy what I do
Yeah.
so much. And I don't I think, especially big oil and gas companies, a lot of people don't have that easy downshift. It's really demanding, high paced, long hours, and then retirement. And sometimes there's natural glide path to consulting or other things, but not
Yeah.
everyone really finds that. So there were some challenges. So then we transitioned into COVID, and COVID was a hard time for a lot of us. I personally, was struggling with running a business. I'm a very extroverted person. I had my regular like workouts and classes and connections and get-togethers, and I just found myself stuck at home, depressed. My wife, who's as a pediatrician, was going into work every day seeing people, and I remember she would come home after being exhausted, wearing masks and fully bundled up and dealing with COVID and just stressed out because she was feeling all this, and I was like looking for human connection that I just wasn't getting
Yeah.
off Teams meetings, and she was just mentally and physically exhausted from everything that was going on, and that was I found that to be a hard, depressing time that it wasn't to share with. But I was still very busy with trying to figure out how to adjust, change, grow a business, keep everyone motivated while there was all this uncertainty. What was it like for you as you've transitioned from this high demanding career to now I'm in retirement? I thought I could travel, I thought we could do these things. And then all of a sudden, boom, COVID
Yeah.
happened.
Yeah. It was like hitting a wall. I mean, I like I said, I'd kept myself very busy,
Mhm.
doing the things that I wanted to do, but that busyness was not the same as purpose. I had joined a
Mhm.
Swiss trading firm to consult with them
Mhm.
um, around business development. So that helped a little bit. But all of a sudden, I went from these things that I'd used to distract myself,
Mhm.
and that's really how I couch it. Is that in those couple years after retirement, all I was doing was distracting myself
Mhm.
and pushing down these feelings that I had of loss of identity. There's
Mhm.
grief associated with that. And I didn't realize that. I never processed that grief. That created, along with just COVID in general and what was happening, created a great deal of anxiety for me. I had been prescribed Xanax, so I was using Xanax at the time. Over time, Xanax became a real issue for me. And as you mentioned, I fell into addiction. I was addicted to Xanax. So, I that time was really tough looking back because I couldn't leave. We lived in a high rise condo. There was like not really anywhere to go
No,
outside. There wasn't
no
anything I could
backyard,
do. It
not
was
much you
just
can. Yeah.
this 2,700 square feet that we lived in.
During this time period, you were depressed, you had
Yeah,
anxiety, you
yeah,
got addicted to Xanax as a way to cope.
yeah,
Um, when did you realize you needed to do something different?
yeah,
How did you eventually pull yourself through? What led you to that? What did that look like?
yeah. At one point, I just remember saying, I need to do something about this. This is not working.
Did you just wake up one day, or was
It,
there any
it was,
anything behind that?
I kind of woke up one day.
Mhm.
Um, I was hiding my Xanax use,
Mhm.
and my husband at the time asked me if, are you taking Xanax? And I would not be truthful. I would say
Mhm.
no because I was ashamed of it.
Mhm.
And I just remember at one point I just said, "Yeah, I am, and I think I need to go get treatment
Mhm.
because I don't think I can stop on my own." So I just said, "I need to do something different. I'm
Mhm.
not happy. This anxiety is overwhelming, and I don't know of any other way to cope with it." I think a lot of that anxiety, as I mentioned, wasn't just related to COVID.
Mhm.
It was related to this grief that I had that I had not processed of the loss of my identity.
And then COVID magnified it.
It just became overwhelming. So I made the decision to go to treatment, and I entered treatment on July 1st,
Mhm.
2022.
What was that like?
Humbling,
Mhm.
you know, I sat in a lot of shame at the time. How did I go from being a shell executive to being in rehab? And then I learned a lot during that time. And one of the things I learned is that there's a difference between shame and guilt. Shame is I'm a bad person,
Mhm.
and that's a useless emotion. I can't do anything with that
Mhm.
except wallow in it. Guilt is a constructive emotion. Guilt is I did something wrong, not I am a bad person, but I did something bad.
And you can change your
And I
behaviors.
can change my behavior going forward. I just have to be willing. And that's the biggest thing that I learned is that without willingness, we don't, there's no use trying to change. While I was there, I reached out. I got the phone number from one of the people who came in to volunteer, and I volunteered in there now twice a week.
At the Prevention Recovery Center.
Yeah,
So you're a sponsor, you volunteer?
I sponsor in AA,
Mhm.
and I also go back on Mondays and Tuesdays and volunteer there. On Monday, I'm a part of a group of 6 or 7 guys who come in
Mhm.
and facilitate a men's process group.
Mhm.
And then on Tuesdays, I come in and actually lead a session around the AA Big Book.
Okay. You had addiction.
Yeah,
You went and got help. You realized you needed to get help.
yeah,
You went and got the help. You
yeah,
processed through some of these things. And then along the way, you got involved with sponsoring others and giving feedback and helping yourself. What did that help you realize during this phase, especially as you've been processing, dealing with the grief of your identity, dealing with who you are and what you want to be during, frankly, this stressful time for everyone?
yeah. I remember when I reached out to the guy who I had not met, who's I just had a name and a phone number.
Mhm.
I reached out to him while I was in treatment, and we talked for a while. And and I'd asked him if he could sponsor me,
Mhm.
and he told me something that was just life changing.
Mhm.
What he said was, "If we work together, I'm going to show you a better way of living." And when he said that, I was 55 years old.
Mhm.
I remember just thinking, that is what I've been looking for my entire life. I've been looking for a better way of living.
You wanted someone to help you make that impact, and then you realized along the way that that was something that you could do for others?
Exactly. About 5 months into my sobriety, I'd finished my
Mhm.
steps, and there was a friend of mine who I'd met
Mhm.
in treatment in rehab, and he had struggled. He relapsed 2 more times in that
Mhm.
time period, and the second time he relapsed, one of the other people who came in to volunteer said, "I think actually you might make a really good sponsor for him, for
Mhm.
Kevin." I phoned up my sponsor. I said, "I'm just not sure about this. He's a friend,
Mhm.
and I just don't know how
It
that's gonna
could
work."
change your
Yeah, yeah,
relationship. Yeah, you
yeah.
didn't wanna impact the
Yeah,
friendship.
yeah, exactly. But what he said was, "You just have to be cognizant of when you have your friend hat on
Mhm.
and when you have your sponsor hat on."
And you're able to navigate that pretty
I
well?
was able to navigate that.
Okay.
He After that second time that he relapsed, he we started working together, we got through a few of the steps, and he relapsed once more. There was something I learned profound that I learned during that time.
Mhm.
So, after he relapsed that third time, we got together and started working the steps again. I didn't do anything differently. We just did it. He has now been sober for over 2.5 years.
Wow.
And he actually comes in with me on Tuesdays to help me lead the session
Mhm.
at the Prevention and Recovery Center.
And so sponsoring him, what was that realization that you made along the way in terms of your purpose and your identity?
Yeah, it started to give me a purpose.
Mhm.
My purpose was, as my sponsor had said, showing other people a better way of living,
Mhm.
one that's rooted in authenticity and honesty, um, and and really regaining part of your spiritual self. I realized that before I'd really thought, how could I manage people?
Mhm.
How could I control what they were going to do? How could I,
You can't control people.
can't control people. I thought I could, but I can't. And so at that point, I realized that I didn't do anything other than be there for him, ask him
Mhm,
questions, and help him figure that out. So I'd been there was a therapist that I saw coming out, and
mhm.
and one day we were having a conversation about just life in general, and at that point I'd already filed for divorce, and he said, I think coaching might be something for you to look into,
So
executive coaching.
your therapist was connecting what you're doing as a sponsor and brought up the idea to you because you hadn't made the connection yourself at that point, but your
No,
therapist brought it up saying, "Hey, maybe coaching could be your next career, your next identity, the next thing that gives you purpose."
I think so. Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you realize that you were getting purpose from giving back as a sponsor. Your therapist, and I'm a big fan of therapy myself, shared this idea that maybe connected the dots, that maybe coaching could be something for you,
Yeah.
and you decided to pursue that. How has coaching been going so far? Because my understanding, you've been doing some coaching, you have some coaching clients, you focus your coaching on leadership, on people that are thinking about what going through, frankly, the same thing you did. Like, what is retirement? What is purpose? What does identity mean? How has that been going?
It's been really great.
Mhm,
You know, so I really kind of help a life cycle.
mhm,
I really focus in on 4 areas,
mhm,
but I work on career clarity with
mhm,
people who are maybe in the early parts of their career or wanna
mhm,
make a drastic change.
mhm. Like
The
changing careers or like figure out how to grow, or what does that really
It
mean?
could be either. I have one client who was the director of the Urban Harvest, farmers market,
Mhm,
and he had been there for 15 years doing that role, and he really wanted to do something different.
mhm,
So we started exploring what he could do. We get into the traits
mhm,
that he brought to any position.
mhm,
Before that, we kind of got into what he values
mhm,
in a workplace. He made the shift, and it was about 3 months. He made the shift from being the director of Urban Harvest
mhm,
to commercial real estate.
mhm.
And he would kind of think and say, well, that's not really a logical, like, how do you do that?
How do you ma yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that those are 2 very different things in my book,
Exactly.
yeah.
We honed in on where his passion was. His
Mhm,
passion was in connecting people,
mhm,
in in building
mhm,
something. He had a lot of connections in the restaurant business,
mhm,
basis his work at Urban Harvest, and and so it became a very natural fit for him.
mhm.
And I don't know, when I see someone like that make a change, when I see somebody gain comfort in who they are, so that they can bring their presence to work,
Mhm,
that is extremely fulfilling to me.
mhm.
That is, I get joy from that.
One, I think it's a big impact. I think one of the things we're always searching for is that happiness and that identity and that purpose. And sometimes we end up in careers or in paths by accident that may or may not be the best fit. And I find when we're living in things, it's hard for us to kind of see outside of the box sometimes we've put ourselves in, but yet working with someone and brainstorming and whiteboarding and thinking through possibilities can really be quite productive.
Absolutely. I mean, so I mentioned the career clarity part. The middle part that I do is around something I call effortless presence,
Hmm.
which just at its base is I'm going to stop hustling for legitimacy.
Hmm.
I'm going to be just comfortable with who I am
Hmm.
and realize that the only things I can do in life are try to show up the best way that I can today,
Hmm.
try to show up better tomorrow than I did today.
Hmm.
And um, I'm a human being. I'm going to make mistakes.
We all are.
Exactly. So when I make a mistake, I own up to it. So I help people get to a place, and coaching is not therapy. So I think therapy is an amazing thing. It's helped me an incredible amount. But coaching can help you make strategic plans for how you want to get to that place. So I focus on that effortless presence piece. And then I also am certified in something called EQI and EQ 360, which
Mhm,
is an emotional intelligence
mhm,
assessment. Because IQ, they say, makes up about, say, 60% of your
mhm.
success. Emotional intelligence, the how you show up part, makes up another 30%, and then the 10% is something else.
Maybe even more so as you move into management and leadership and executive roles.
Exactly. In addition to learning how to coach, I got a lot of insight as to what I didn't do when
Mhm.
I retired,
Mhm.
and the the pain that I went through at that point. And what I realize is that with this knowledge, I can help other people potentially avoid that period.
And I think, I mean, I see it all the time. There's a big need for that. And I mean, as you mentioned, we're good at running the numbers. We're good at helping people feel comfortable making choices. We're good at the transition. But outside of the financials of, can I retire? Do I have enough? Where's my health insurance going to come from? Can I afford all these different things? I think the big thing that I see is people either have something that they get into that provides them purpose and engagement in retirement and they thrive, or the ones that don't decline. And, I think that we as humans, we need work. We need good stress. I see that with my clients that don't find that within 5, 10 years, you see a mental decline, you see a physical decline. The ones that are able to find the next thing, whether that's consulting, whether that's boards or hobbies or family, they thrive. But it's not everyone hits that, and sometimes I'm surprised who does and who doesn't, and I think that's a big challenge, especially if you've had 30-year career at one company. So one of the things I'm seeing, particularly right now, and I'm seeing, there's a lot of consolidations in oil and gas. There's a lot of severance packages going out. We're seeing that from our clients at Shell and Chevron and BP and other energy companies. What advice would you give to others that are finding themselves with a package, maybe suddenly, maybe earlier than they expected? And if they're hearing the news, yeah, you can afford to retire, but it wasn't what they were expecting at this stage, at this age, what advice would you give to them?
I would say that, and I hear this. I hear this a lot. I hear this from friends at Shell who
Mhm.
have retired. Some of them say, I can't wait to retire. I can't wait to do whatever I want to do. I'm going to travel all the time.
I see that a lot.
You can only travel so much.
Mhm.
I can only stay so busy to distract myself from how I'm feeling. I can only speak for myself. I had fear around losing my identity.
Mhm.
I was used
Even before you
even
pulled the trigger.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. I was thinking about it and I'm like, okay, well, who am I? Who am I? For 30 years, when you meet somebody, one of the first questions they ask is, what do you do?
Mhm. And you didn't know how you were gonna respond to
I
that.
didn't know how I was going to respond to that.
And you were relatively young when you retired. You
I
were you were
was.
in your 50s. This
Yeah.
this was not like, I
Yeah.
just physically can't do this anymore.
Right. Right. I would say the best advice is to just take an honest assessment and just, if you don't know what your purpose is going to be after work, there is a process to go through. I mean, we can work on that through coaching. Coaching is not me providing the answers or saying you ought to go do this.
Mhm.
It's really uncovering what it is that you want to do. And through this training that I took, there's a really structured process
Mhm.
that goes through. In fact, I just developed an 8-week
Mhm.
program to kind of guide people through that for small group for like 4 to 6 people.
Okay.
And there are deliverables, there are outcomes. Okay, I can't. The 30 years of Shell, where we were talking about outcomes and
Mhm.
deliverables and things like that, that doesn't leave you. You
Mhm.
know, that's kind of like they,
So a structured process can be helpful for someone, particularly if they're not finding success navigating that on
yeah,
their own.
yeah. And it doesn't have to be done after you retire. It can
Mhm.
be done if you're considering retirement.
Mhm.
Um,
And have that fear of the unknown.
exactly. When you address the cognitive decline and things like
Mhm.
that, there are 5 key life areas that we get from this training. The reason we focus in on those is because there is cognitive decline
Mhm.
after you leave work. There is social
Mhm.
aspects.
I think you mentioned previously to me that like 50% of your social interactions disappear as you transition from work to retirement. And that's a lot.
It's a lot, and, when you think about it, you're at work 8 hours a day, 8,
Mhm.
9, or in my case, maybe 10.
Mhm.
But and then afterwards, you're still talking to people, your email it takes up a huge amount of my social interaction. I would say that 50% drop in social interactions was probably on the low side for me.
Wow.
Yeah. So the other aspects, so there's the mental side of it, there's the, uh There's a social aspect of it. There's a physical aspect of it as well.
Mhm.
As we grow older, we lose muscle, our bodies change. What do I need to do to stay in in good physical shape so that I can enjoy my retirement, and do the things that I want to do, and serve the purpose that I have?
I often see clients and say, like, when they're going through their retirements, like, take 3 to 6 months, do the travel, do the hobbies, do, like, the decompression, stress relief, but then think about what you wanna do. So,
Exactly.
like, consulting, boards, next career. But I think the 3 to 6 months I find, sometimes 9, is good to just, like, take that time, especially if you're in a very demanding career. But I do think after that time period, there needs to be a sort of reassessment of what people wanna do, or if they're already feeling it ahead of time, it might even make sense to go through a process like what you're offering if there's that fear of uncertainty, maybe particularly for younger people that can afford to be financially independent, but are really struggling with identity and sensing that early on. As I was preparing for this talk today and I was scrolling through LinkedIn, I saw this post by Peter Morrison. Peter Morrison wrote, "After a long run at BP, I will be finishing up at the end of September, and despite looking forward to taking a break, I'm worried that I've placed too much of my identity in my job."
Yeah. If Peter were a client of mine, I think what I would do is first just acknowledge the honesty that he's bringing to this conversation. It's a level of honesty that I wish I had had for myself when I retired.
I mean, I didn't
But
even realize you were going through that.
exactly,
Mhm,
exactly. But what a great deal of self awareness he
mhm,
has. When you're at a company for decades, your identity is pretty easy to identify. When someone asks you at a dinner party, "What do you do?" The answer kind of just rolls off your tongue. Once you're retired and they ask you that question, I know for myself, I thought, how am I going to answer that? So, if Peter were my client, one of the first things, like I said, we do is acknowledge the honesty involved in what he said, but then really starting to dig into the questions around what is it that gives you drive?
mhm,
What is it that is of most interest to you?
mhm.
We would go through a process of writing a farewell letter. There's
Writing a farewell letter.
Yeah,
Hmm,
writing a
interesting.
farewell letter because there is grief associated. We are losing something.
Yeah.
Even though we may be exhausted from work,
Mhm,
and ready to go to a place where I like that stress is off of me.
mhm. There's still fear of that unknown and that transition.
Exactly. And we're talking about fear. There are two types of fear. There's a healthy fear, which is like there's a tiger walking down the street. I'm not going to go out there and kick it.
Mhm,
There's unhealthy fear. And unhealthy fear is losing something I have or not getting something that I want. It doesn't have to be something tangible like losing a house, losing a car, losing, a
mm,
friend, whatever. The loss there is your loss of identity.
mhm.
There is fear behind that. And I know there was for me of the loss of that identity.
Yeah, I think Peter posed some really great questions. The first one, what helped you redefine yourself outside of work? And so, what advice, if we're, would you give Peter to that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I really, in my coaching, I will offer suggestions, but I really do focus in on diving into the answer for him as an individual.
Hmm. How would you get to the answer for him? What
Yeah.
would you discuss?
Yeah. What helped you redefine yourself outside of work? For me, was really thinking about the aspects of what I enjoyed while I was at work.
Hmm.
When I look back at my career, I come into a position, I
Hmm.
make the changes that I think are going to make it better. I leave, somebody comes in and does it differently.
Hmm.
It's not lasting. In hindsight, when I look back at what was lasting, it's the people who I coached and mentored
Hmm.
during my career and who I'm still in touch with. And I get great joy in seeing them, succeed and moving on to different positions. It's for me, that was the purpose. And so I think for Peter, it's really important to understand, what is it, okay, work is your identity, but there are aspects of work that really drove you.
Hmm.
And then from that, we can talk about purpose and get to what that looks like.
I love that. So taking what elements of work were really impactful for him and then thinking about and brainstorming how we can find similar elements in the next phase so that he gets that joy, he gets that purpose.
Exactly.
His next question was, what would you tell your past self during a career shift?
I would ask, what are you afraid of? One of the things that, if I'm completely honest, that I was afraid of was the perception that others would have
Hmm.
of me retiring and not being in this position that I was in. That just gets back to my pride and ego. So what I would tell myself at this point is just get past that. Don't be afraid of the future and what you're going to do. I wish that I had known about retirement coaching when I was retiring,
Hmm.
because that's something I think that would have really served me. And maybe not had me experience the pain that you mentioned, getting up to the point where I did find that purpose.
His last question, which I thought was quite interesting, did you discover any rituals or habits that made things easier?
One of the things that we work on in retirement coaching is, what does your structure look like?
Hmm.
You come from an environment where your day is pretty structured. I mean, I remember that before I left, I'd look at my calendar and say, okay, well, here are all the meetings that I
Hmm.
have. And usually it was running from one to the other.
Hmm. It's
Here are
busy,
all
it's structured, you know what you're going to do.
exactly. I had structure on my calendar. I knew what I was going. I knew my calendar was usually pretty full a week out.
Hmm.
So I kind of knew what was going to happen. All of a sudden, I retired, and I didn't have that structure.
Hmm.
And so I think one of the really great aspects of that, and what I would work with Peter on, is figuring out what that structure looks like for him.
Hmm.
It doesn't have to be filled.
Hmm.
It just has to be something that you have some.
What about yourself? What are the rituals and habits that gave you the structure you needed to get to fulfillment and
Yeah,
retirement?
yeah. On the physical side, I did something I never thought I would do. I enrolled in a powerlifting and CrossFit course.
Powerlifting,
Powerlifting
that's pretty hardcore
at
CrossFit
at
stuff.
age 55, and it's
Mhm,
something I had never done before, and I was
mhm,
like, I'll just try it. I'll just see what's gonna happen. If I make a fool of myself, fine, I make a fool of myself. But
mhm,
that is something I do every day at 10 o'clock.
mhm.
Um,
Every day?
Monday through Thursday.
Okay, really?
Um,
Every day at 10 o'clock?
every day
Wow.
at 10 o'clock, and I've been doing it now for over 2 years.
Mhm,
And so that's something that is like a, unless I have a meeting that I have to go to, that is regularly on my schedule,
mhm,
because having physical fitness allows me to do the things that I want to do to find purpose. The other things is I have volunteer things on my calendar. The treatment center that I went to,
mhm,
I volunteer there.
mhm,
So on at 12:30 on Monday and
mhm,
12:30 on Tuesdays,
mhm,
I go and volunteer there.
mhm.
And on Mondays, it's a group of,
And
six to
that's the Prevention Recovery Center.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. There's a group of, 6 or 7 guys who come in and we all help lead a men's process group there.
Mhm.
And afterwards, about half of us go out to lunch. So
So you're getting your social
I
connection
get my,
while also giving back, providing purpose.
exactly.
Mhm,
Exactly. The thing I found that by doing that and then I also am on the board of Habitat for Humanity. That's not as regular meetings
mhm,
as this is, but I have something that I'm doing all the time. And the interesting thing is that structure, I had that before I got into coaching,
mhm.
but it really helped crystallize my purpose and what I wanted to do, and how I'm a positive benefit to others as they're going through these things.
I mean, I think humans, period, we need structure. I mean, my wife and I have 3 small kids, and we like to pretend that, we don't have the same challenges as children, but the summer with the unstructured, it's this day camp and it's this, and I mean, they're just not their best selves, and after a week or 2 of getting all of them in school and a regular structure and regular activities and just they're very different
Yeah.
humans, and I think whether it's kids or whether it's adults, like, having that routine structure is just so beneficial. And I think when you go from this highly structured environment that you've kind of built your life around to something entirely different, it's starting over to rebuild that structure. And that can be hard.
Yeah, it can be really hard. I mean, one day you're at work and you have a full calendar, and the next day there's no structure. There's nothing there.
Mhm.
You know?
And just the realization that you need to start building the structure
Yeah.
because we kind of feel like We're adults, we're fine, we can figure it out from day to day, but we need that structure.
I believe so. We need structure and we need purpose.
Mhm.
By just focusing in on the actions that I can take, just focusing in on the structure and what I'm going to do, that was really crucial in me finding what my purpose is.
Mhm. So I know we've worked with you for a while, and we talked a little bit already about leading up to retirement, the transition to retirement. But there's two sudden things that weren't really necessarily in your plan. You went through a divorce, you had a career pivot, finding your purpose, getting into coaching. There are many things that you could discuss with an advisor. What was the most impactful for you?
I mean, certainly both of those big life events were something that I really leaned on heavily with my advisor.
Mhm,
Is, what does this look like financially,
mhm,
both for the divorce and then for, starting up this business as well.
mhm,
That was key to me getting to a comfortable place around both of those. With regards to the divorce, it was something that I needed to do for myself and for
mhm,
my health. So the financial consequences were going to be whatever they were going to be.
mhm,
But as it became clear, having the financial advisor there really stopped me ruminating and thinking about what those consequences were going to be. I remember at that time, I did not really like manage the relationship with my attorney.
mhm,
I just kind of put my trust in her and said, do the best job that you can.
mhm,
I just kind of let it go.
mhm,
And you know what? It all turned out fine.
mhm.
And
That's
on
great.
on the business side, in addition to just the financial advising of what it looks like from a cash flow standpoint, leaning on the tax expertise that your
Mhm,
firm brings, helping me understand the impacts of different expenses and how to categorize it and what it could do. That was really crucial in me. You know,
Setting
re-
up your consulting business,
exactly
your coaching
because
business. Yeah.
yeah, working for a large corporation is really different than setting up your own LLC and um, managing the expenses around it for sure.
For sure, for sure. Well, Tim, I really enjoyed the conversation today. I feel like this, as I mentioned at the beginning, is one of the top things we see that people don't really discuss. And it's that, yeah, most of our conversations, if you think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, is, am I going to have shelter? Am I going to have clothing? Am I going to have medical care? Then some people are really focused on optimizing taxes. But after that, the identity shift and the people that navigate that well, I think really matters the structure, the purpose in terms of the happiness and the joy uh, as people move into retirement or not. And you see that decline for those that don't have anything they're moving towards. So I really appreciated having you out. If anyone is interested in learning more about what you can offer, how can I get in contact with you?
Yeah, I'm really easy to find. My website is www.coachtoelevate.com.
Hmm.
You can go there. I actually have a retirement guide
Hmm.
that I've developed
Hmm.
that's free to download.
Hmm.
It's called Retirement Reimagined.
Hmm.
You can also schedule a discovery call with me. So there's a button where you can go on. It'll bring up my schedule, and you can schedule a half hour with me. Email is very easy as well. It's tim@coachtoelevate.com.
Hmm.
I was really kind and didn't put my last name in there to make you have to type the entire alphabet.
I've known you for a while, and I still have to look it up in the CRM. Well, and if we're going to include links to Tim's website in the description if anybody wants to find it. Additionally, there'll be links to our website. For those of you who don't know us, Willis Johnson Associates is a fee-only fiduciary wealth management firm focusing on working with energy execs. We have CPAs on staff, so we can help with both the financial planning, tax services, tax preparation and planning, as well as investment management. Tim, thank you very much. Enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks for having me.